Please give a hand for Charles.
Twix, yes. Hi, everybody. I am very happy to be here today. Actually, last year I came to present the threat model for hardware wallet, and today I'm going to present how the threat actually apply. My presentation is called Funds are ScAFE, and this is the security assessment of open source hardware wallets. First of all, a quick word about me. As you can hear, I'm French. My name is Charles Guillemet. I'm Chief Security Officer at Ledger. So basically, I'm in charge of the security of Ledger's products. And as you can imagine, it's a pretty big topic. My background is hardware security. I worked in hardware security for more than 10 years, designing a secure system and trying to break them as well. My background is cryptography and mathematics, and of course, hardware security. I joined Ledger a bit more than 1 year ago, and I created what is called them to counteract our attack. Our fields of expertise are Sidechannel attacks, perturbation attacks, software attacks, and of course, cryptography. As a global leader in the industry, we feel the responsibility to enhance the security of the whole ecosystem. We want to help individuals and industries to secure their digital assets. To do so, we share our attack method. We also share our attack tools that you can find on GitHub. And recently, we spent some time to evaluate the security of open source hardware wallets. And this is the topic of my presentation. So we limited our study to SCA, like side-channel attacks, software copy attacks, supply chain attacks, and a surprise concluding attack. But first of all, I will do a very brief introduction of open source hardware wallets. The target of our evaluation is Trezor. Trezor is the most popular open source hardware wallet, and it's used as a basis for all the other open source hardware wallets. It's a fully open source project which implements a monolithic operating system, and it acts as a security enclave. That means that the keys remain inside the circuit, and they never leave the circuit. I mean, we hope so. It implements an immutable bootloader, which is in charge of checking the signature of the firmware which runs into. The main security function is a PIN verification. That means that if the user does not enter its PIN, he cannot do anything with its funds. The cryptography is implemented in software because they use a general purpose MCU, and this MCU does not embed a cryptography accelerator. So having a fully open source project has definitely some benefits. The first one is anyone can audit the code, so it's definitely a benefit. It's possible to compile and load your own firmware. It's pretty cool as well. But there is also drawbacks. When you want to build a fully open source solution, you have no choice for the hardware you use. You cannot use secure hardware. You are forced to use a general purpose MCU. General purpose MCU are pretty cool MCU for many applications, like your boiler, like your TV remote controller, but they are not designed for security. They are designed for low power, they are designed for having a low-cost circuit, but they are not designed for security. And also, this kind of MCU can be bought on any electronic store, so it's difficult to ensure the genuineness of such devices. So first of all, I'm going to talk about genuineness. because it's an important topic. Supply chain attacks. So supply chain attacks consist for an attacker to try to modify, to alter, or to replace a device during the supply chain. The supply chain starts from the design of the device, then the manufacturing, up to the shipping to the user. As a user, when I receive my Trezor, the question is, how can I be sure this Trezor is genuine? I'm doing some spoiler. The answer is there is no way to be sure of that. Trezor implemented two different measures to guarantee the genuineness of the device. The first one is to have a immutable bootloader. That means that this bootloader is supposed to be read-only, but the problem is that this bootloader can be overwritten in software. They notice this, they try to patch it. It's probably correctly patched on Twizzle. I don't know, they did some MPU trickery, but on other projects, it's not patched. But in all cases, it's always possible to open the box, to take the circuit, erase it, and reload the new bootloader and a new firmware, or even to unsolder the circuit and to solder back another circuit. So the bootloader is not very immutable. The second security measure for guaranteeing the genuineness is a security holographic seal. This is the small sticker on the box. As you can see, we play with this holographic security seal, and if you use some hot hair and a scalpel, it's not very difficult to remove this security seal and then open the box, remove the genuine device, the black one, and replace this device by a white device. For the sticker, it's also possible to find manufacturer in China and to manufacture exact clone of the sticker, and it costs around $1. Trezor is aware of this because there are some counterfeiting of their product. So what we did for now is to take a black device, put it in the open the box, remove the black device, and replace it by a white device. So it's interesting, but it's not really an attack. But why does it matter? It does matter because in this white device, I could insert some kind of backdoor. You can backdoor the device in many different ways. The most obvious way is to do preceding. Preceding, that means that you are the attacker, you put a seed inside the device, you modify the firmware such as the user thinks he is about to generate its own seed, but is not, and then you already know his seed. There are many other different ways to backdoor the device, but I won't get into all these details. One can argue, if I buy my device at Trezor, I can be sure that it will be a genuine one. Actually, it's not completely the case, because there are many different ways to get into supply chain, and a very common attack is the following. You buy a lot of devices from Trezor, you take them, you backdoor them, and you send them back to the manufacturer asking for reimbursement using your withdrawal period. And in this case, there is a lot of chance that this device go to legit users. I spent some time to implement a backdoor firmware, and as you can see, it's a brand new firmware where you connect it for the first time to your computer. This is the first screen. Then you go on Trezor website, which requests you to verify if the sticker is OK. Then you load the Trezor firmware, you believe so, and then you will generate your own seed. But in this case, I already preceded the device, and the seed is security issue, security issue, security issue. So I can offer a device, but I already know the seed. So this was the first item. We responsibly disclosed this problem to Trezor, and they, in November, I guess, and they said us that it's out of the scope. So it's quite unfortunate. We were a bit disappointed, but this is their product at the end. The second item is the software copy attacks for the SCA theme. So this is a hardware device, but on this hardware there is some software which runs on top of it, and this software, as soon as you write some software, there can be some vulnerabilities. So we try to evaluate the security of this software stack. This is the monolithic operating system, so the attack surface is quite smaller, but still this is some software. So we implemented mostly fuzzing. We fuzzed all the software interface, and we found 2 vulnerabilities on this software stack. It was possible to overwrite the stack. That could have been a problem, but their stack is, there is a stack protection, a stack cookie. So it would have been possible to brute force the stack cookie, but at the end there was only a few bytes controlled by the attacker, maybe 6 or 8. So we think this vulnerability were not exploitable. So it's a pretty good code base, because only 2 vulnerability with such a code base, it's not that much. We reported it to them. There's 2 vulnerabilities, and they properly patched them very quickly, so we were happy. The first item is Sidechannel attacks. This is my favorite one. Sidechannel attacks consist in measuring the power consumption of a device or the electromagnetic emanation of the device during its computation, and to try to figure out if there is a correlation between this power consumption and the data which is handled inside the device. And if there is such a correlation, there are many ways to exploit it. This kind of attacks have been discovered during the 90s by Paul Kocher. At this time that was called DPA, and now this is a very wide class of attacks with a lot of different exploitation. I will give 2 examples on Twizzle. We study the verify pin function, which is the core security function of Twizzle. It's a very simple function. When the user inputs his pin, the device will scan the digit one after the other, and we'll compare this digit with the correct value of the pin. At the end, if all the digits are correct, it's OK. If they're not, it's not OK. So we measure the power consumption of the device during this pin comparison. This is our awesome oscilloscope with the device. You can see electromagnetic probe and the power consumption probe. So we input a lot of different pins to the device and measure the power consumption of the device during this pin comparison. And then, regardless the value of the pin we input, we try to figure out if there is a correlation between the traces and the correct value of the pin, which is stored inside the flash, because it's used during the comparison, of course. And the colored peak on the bottom means that there is such a correlation. Now I will explain quickly how this correlation can be exploited. In computer vision, there is such hype around deep learning. In deep learning, the idea is to, for the image, the idea is to recognize things on an image. If we take the example of dogs and cats, the idea is to collect a large number of dogs and cats pictures, feed them to a machine learning algorithm, and train it. For each picture, we explicit that this very picture is a cat and this picture is a dog. You do it with a large number of pictures, and at the end, the machine learning algorithm is trained. And you take a picture, you request to the machine learning algorithm, is it a dog or is it a cat? And it will give you a probability for this very picture to be a dog or to be a cat. We can learn the power consumption of the device for the pin verification in a very similar way. You take a device A, you input a large number of different pin value, correct pin value, and then you measure the power consumption of the device when this pin value is used. So we train our machine learning algorithm on a device A with a large number of traces, and then on a device B, we measure the power consumption of the device during the pin comparison, and we request to the machine learning algorithm what is the correct value of the pin, and it will give us the most likely value for each digit. So putting all the things together, we get a device A, we record many traces with random value of pin, then we train our machine learning algorithm to learn the behavior of the device during this pin comparison as a function of the correct value of the pin. And then the second phase is the attack phase. The attacker gets a physical access to the device B, and then it enters a random value for the pin, measures the power consumption of the device, and asks to the machine learning algorithm what is the most likely value of the pin. The second try will be this, most likely value of the pin. If it's the correct value, it's OK, it's finished, the attack is finished. But if it's not, we have a second trace, which will be fed to the machine learning algorithm, and we will request what is the most likely value of the pin, and so on. And what we do, and the result is, on average, 5 tries only are necessary to guess the correct value of the pin. What we can say is this function is broken because on Trezor you have 15 tries. So in all cases, our technique allows us to break the security of the pin. We are able to guess the correct value of the pin. Again, we responsibly disclose this vulnerability and our attack to Trezor. And in this case, they took this very seriously, and they changed completely their implementation. Their new implementation looks like something like this. I'm not completely sure. What I can say, I don't really like when it's complex because it's difficult to audit and to understand everything for the security, but I'm pretty sure it's more difficult to attack this implementation. So we are happy with this. A second target was the scalar multiplication. The scalar multiplication is the core function for cryptography in cryptocurrency. It's used for signing. It's used for computing your public key from your private key. So this is a very important function. We looked at their implementation, and we noticed this comment. It's secure against side-channel attacks. So we decided to verify. So in a very similar way, we input a large number of random scalar. We collected traces and tried to figure out if there is a correlation between the value of the bits, the successive bits of the scalar and the traces. And as you can see, there is a very high correlation. So again, in a very similar way, we were able to retrieve the value of the scalar. And when you have the value of the scalar, it's only mathematics to retrieve the private key. It's very easy. This attack works with around 10 traces or something like this. Again, we responsibly disclosed this vulnerability to Trezor on December, but this time they did not patch it. There is a good reason why, because in order to trigger this function, the user needs to enter its PIN. So if an attacker gets physical access to your device, he won't be able to trigger this function and get the measurement in order to retrieve the key. So it's fair enough. But as their code is open source, their library could be used by other parties. So my requirement would be just to remove this comment because it's simply false. Usually, the pin verification function is not attacked using Sidechannel Attack. On passport, on banking card, in order to try to break pin verification, you don't use Sidechannel attacks because this kind of secure element are very hard to attack against Sidechannel attacks. And with a pin verification, only few traces are definitely not enough. In order to break pin verification, the main vector is fault attacks. The idea is to inject a fault on the circuit during its computation and bypass the pin verification. This is what Sergei Volokitin presented a few weeks ago at OffensiveCon. He was able to bypass the pin verification function on a keep key and then without entering any pin to be logged in the keep key. He used EMFI. EMFI is electromagnetic fault injection, and it worked perfectly. There are other examples in the past when people implemented fault attacks to break the security of Trezor. And the most recent one was Colin O'Flynn, who implement also EMFI to dump the seed from the device. And also another one from Dmitry Nadospazov, who implemented also a fault attack using glitches. And this fault attack allows him to dump the seed from the device. In all these cases, the attacks can be fixed and has been fixed. I think it's not completely fixed because just the implementation is different. You will have to find another timing, another part of the code to fault, and at the end, it will be broken again. What we did is a bit different. We worked on the same device, and we found and implemented an attack which allows us to dump the seed for us also. On the Trezor one and all the clones, this is the same. Trezor one, KeepKey, bWallet, all the clones. But also on Trezor T, I think we are the first one to do that. But unfortunately, in our case, there's no way to fix it. It's completely broken. So we decided not to explain how we did it, because there is no way to fix it. So in order to keep the user safe, we decided not to explain how we did. But we explained that this very attack exists, and this is very likely that another people find it and exploit it. So we responsibly disclosed this vulnerability to Trezor in December, and they did not patch it, of course, because they simply can't. But they did not warn their user, and I think it's not a good practice. So in this condition, if ever you want to use Trezor, you need to know that this very attack exists, and if you want to prevent this attack, the only way to do it is to use a pretty long passphrase. When I say pretty long passphrase, is if you want to have the same level of security as the security of your seed, something like 256 bits, you need a 36 long character passphrase. But the problem with Trezor is that this passphrase must be input on the computer. And if your computer is malwared, I think it's a problem. So to wrap up everything, we spent around 2 months to evaluate the security of the open source hardware wallet. What we found is that the supply chain attack vector is not taken into account seriously enough. We found that the software stack is quite good software stack. There is not so much vulnerability, and what we found have been fixed. We found a Sidechannel attack which breaks the security of Trezor, but which has been patched by Trezor. We also find Sidechannel Attack on the Scalar Multiplication of Trezor, which have not been patched, but again, it does not break the security model. And we found 2 other attacks, one on Trezor 1 and one on Trezor T, which completely breaks the security of Trezor, and there is no way to fix it. All these vulnerabilities have been disclosed responsibly to Trezor between October and December. We had very good exchange with their security team, and we agreed with them for a disclosure date. We even agreed to 2 extensions, and the disclosure date was a few days ago. And what we want first is to keep all the users in the ecosystem safe, including Trezor user. As a conclusion, I would want to say that open source does not necessarily imply security. And this work has been performed not only by me, but by all my team, the Ledger Donjon. Thank you for your attention.
So we do have time for one quick question, if there is one.
I guess this leads to the leading question as to what Ledger did differently.
What we did with Trezor during these 2 months, we do it every day on our products. And the main difference, I would say, is that we use secure hardware for our implementation. I mean, our circuit is not used in boiler or on TV remote controller. It's a secure element. It's used in secure application like banking card, passports, and so on. And again, we spend a lot of time trying to break into our device and so on. And for each of the attacks, we try to find a countermeasure.
I understand how power supply and EMI attacks, you can design your code so that it kind of always executes the same algorithm the same way every time, regardless if it's a successful entry or not. But supply chain attacks is a problem across the entire electronics industry. You're not alone with this problem. I have no idea how you're going to guarantee that you've got the right parts from ST or whoever the hell you're buying them from without, what do you do about that?
Okay, pretty good question. As I said, we use secure element, and in the secure element industry, there is common criteria. The common criteria is a third-party evaluation process, which leads to certification. During this evaluation process, the third-party evaluation verify the security of the product. This is one thing, but it also verifies a lot of things, and including supply chain. I mean, during the supply chain, there is different sites which are audited by a third party, and this site must comply a lot of different things. And when we receive our circuit are protected by a private key but only us know. So we are the only one able to load our firmware. And then when our firmware is loaded, there is no way for us for others to load firmware on it. And what we do when our firmware is loaded is to pair our device with an HSM. That means our device generates a key pair, and the public key part is sent to our Ledger HSM, which acts as a root of trust. Our Ledger HSM signs this very public key, and this public key, signed public key, is written inside the device. So when you receive your device, you connect it to your computer. There is a genuine check, and this genuine check consists for the device to prove to our HSM that his key has been signed by our HSM. This is a cryptographic mechanism which allows us to prove that our devices are genuine. It's simply impossible to make a clone of our Trezor.